Over the years, with various people, I've done Christmas readings at Hastings College, and I'm pleased to have this opportunity to do so again. I've done them with famous drama director here at the college, one of my favorite people of all time, Hal Schiffler, and I did it with another, that's not necessarily my favorite, my son Rich, over the years. And so they're not here to accompany me. I wish they were, but I will go ahead with some Christmas readings and a couple of just holiday readings. I'm going to go through some short poems and one somewhat lengthy piece, and I'll tell you about that when I get there. The first two pieces I'm going to read sort of represent two sides of Christmas. The old line is, better to give than receive. And one poem here talks about it is better to give. The other one talks about it's probably better to receive. We'll reverse the order here and start with a poem by Marshetta Shute, and it's called Presents. And the little boy, or a girl, I'm not sure, I think a boy, says this: I wanted a rifle for Christmas. I wanted a bat and a ball. I wanted some skates and a bicycle. I didn't want mittens at all. I wanted a whistle. I wanted a kite. I wanted a pocket knife to shut up tight. I wanted some boots, and I wanted a kit, but I didn't want mittens one little bit. I told them I don't like mittens. I told them as plain as plain. I told them I didn't want mittens, and they've given me mittens again. This is a poem by Gwendolyn Brooks, wonderful poet from Chicago, who came out to Hastings College and spent a week with us way back when. It's called Otto, and this is a poem that's better to give. It's Christmas Day. I did not get the presents I had hoped for, yet it is not nice to frown or fret. To frown or fret would not be fair. My dad must never know I care. It's hard enough for him to bear. It's a wonderful little poem. And an old adage I like a lot, that less is more, and that is a poem where less indeed is more. I want to read two poems by local poets. One by a colleague of mine who still teaches occasionally a creative writing poetry course, Dwight Marsh, a writer that I consider one of the top poets of the Midwest. And it's called One True Word. And Dwight writes a Christmas poem each year and sends me a poem. This one comes from about 10 years ago, and I still like it a lot. One True Word. Speak, anyone who can. One true word. Eloquent, sublime, embellished, or whispered plain, or shouted loud. Say something finely true, precise, and unequivocally clear. Transparent water, pure distilled, so the light shines brilliant through. Pierce our lying, calloused ears. Use crashing, brassy cymbals if you must. Snarling trumpets, drums and snares, whole symphonies or a cappella choirs, or thunder through organ pipes to startle our attention to hear, or write to us in silence from a page, either magazine or book, illuminated vellum or chapbook's yellow page. Convince, persuade, assure us once that through the waves of sight and sound we have seen or heard the truth, in voices spoken from the dark beyond or from an inner light. And we will hear, see, we will embrace, believe one uttered truth unchanging, more rare, more dear than love, on this hurling planet rushing into space, though but an infant sleeping in a manger under warped and twisted beams which bear a roof of clay in a rainless land. Say it clear, and we will fall on our knees and gaze. A lovely, spiritual, profound poem, One True Word by Dwight Marsh. This poem is by someone that many of you probably know. He's Reverend William Bill Nottage Tacey at the First Presbyterian Church. And Bill writes a Christmas poem each year. So I get these nice poems each year and to draw upon. This one is called, by the way, Bill was a student back at the time, nearly the time that Sharon Brooks was a student here. This is a poem called An Enigmatic Noel. In cramped quarters of a Judean cave, genial herdsmen kneel in prayerful vigil before a Galilean family, late arrivals in a census town. All huddle close against the cold, as if near a warming fire with outstretched hands of prayer, here perhaps to receive some holy heat around the Shekinah's sired sunlight. Darkening shadows slink away, exorcised amidst the golden sheen that bathes the face of sheep and shepherds with radiating spirit shine. Illuminating light from celestial child and centering maid, pulsates beams of adoring love and worshipful joy toward these weary toilers of the day and watchers of the night. Silence reigns in splendor dim as jubilant songs of tongue are made more eloquent by awe and wonder, rendered mute. Before this incarnate mystery, an enigma of the infinite wrapped in swaddling clothes of the infant. Poems with similar topic and an important topic this time of year. Spiritually powerful poems, I think, by Dwight and Reverend Bill. This is a little different. I think every now and then we need new recipes at Christmas. It's, you know, the old things, the turkey, the prime rib, the whatever else. That's fine. We want that too. But you need to add something to it. So Hal Schiffer found this years ago, and I've kind of followed up with it. And he gave me this recipe, so I'll give it to you. It deals with the best rum cake you'll ever have. And that's the title, Best Rum Cake Ever. First of all, let me give you the ingredients. If you want to jot them down, go ahead. 1 or 2 quarts rum. 1 cup butter. 1 teaspoon sugar. 2 large eggs. 1 cup dried fruit, some baking powder, 1 teaspoon of soda, some lemon juice, brown sugar, and some nuts. Now, before you start, sample the rum to check for quality. Good, isn't it? Now, go ahead. Select a large mixing bowl, measuring cup, etc. Check that rum again. It must be just right. To be sure the rum is of the highest quality, pour 1 level cup of rum into a glass and drink it as fast as you can. Repeat. With an electric mixer, beat 1 cup of butter in a large, fluffy bowl. Add 1 teaspoon of sugar and beat again. Meanwhile, make sure that the rum is of the finest quality. Try another cup. Open the second quart if necessary. Add 2 large legs, 2 cups of tried druit, and beat till high. If druit gets stuck in beaters, just pry it loose with a drewschriver. Sample the rum again. Beat or sift 2-3 cups or salt, if really doesn't matter. Sample the rum again. Sift 1/2 pint of lemon juice, fold in chopped butter and strained nuts. Add 1 babblespoon of brown sugar or whatever color you can find. Whiz bell, grease oven, and turn cake pan to 150 degrees. Now pour that whole mess into the oven and bake. Check the rum again and bow together. Go to bed. Well, if you can stay sober, it's a good recipe. Next, quite a change of pace. A mixture of nostalgia, humor, everything. I think it is the modern equivalent to Dickens' Christmas Carol. By the way, Charles Dickens is my favorite writer, but I never read A Christmas Carol because Hal Schiffler did it and nobody else should do it after that. This is a great prose poem written by the Welsh writer Dylan Thomas, and it's called A Child's Christmas in Wales. And this is not all of it, most of it, but I want to represent that to you now. A Child's Christmas in Wales by Dylan Thomas. One Christmas was so much like another in those years around that Seatown corner now, and out of all sound, except the distant speaking of the voices I sometimes hear a moment before sleep, that I can never remember whether it snowed for 6 days and 6 nights when I was 12, or whether it snowed for 12 days and 12 nights when I was 6. All Christmases roll down toward the two-tongued sea like a cold and headlong moon, bundling down the sky that was our street. And they stop at the rim of the ice-edged, fish-freezing waves, and I plunge my hand in the snow and bring out whatever I can find. In goes my hand into that wool-white, bell-tongued ball of holidays, resting at the rim of the carol-singing sea, and out comes Mrs. Prothero and the fireman. Well, it was on the afternoon of the day of Christmas Eve, and I was in Mrs. Prothero's garden waiting for cats with her son Jim. It was snowing. It was always snowing at Christmas. December in my memory is white as Lapland, though there were no reindeers. But there were cats, patient, cold, and callous. Our hands wrapped in socks, we waited to snowball the cats. But the wise cats never appeared. We were so still, Eskimo-footed Arctic marksmen in the muffling silence of the eternal snows, eternal ever since Wednesday, that we never heard Mrs. Prothero's first cry from her igloo at the bottom of the garden. Or, if we heard it at all, it was to us like the far-off challenge of our enemy and prey, the neighbor's polar cat. But soon the voice grew louder. "Fire!" cried Mrs. Prothero, and she beat the dinner gong. And we ran down the garden with the snowballs in our arms toward the house, and smoke indeed was pouring out of the dining room, and the gong was bombulating, and Mrs. Prothero was announcing ruin like a town crier in Pompeii. Oh, this was better than all the cats in Wales standing on the wall in a row. We bounded in the house, laden with snowballs, and stopped at the open door of that smoke-filled room. Something was burning, all right. Perhaps it was Mr. Prothero, who always slept there after midday dinner with a newspaper over his face. But he was standing in the middle of the room saying, "A fine Christmas," and smacking at the smoke with a slipper. "Call the fire brigade," cried Mrs. Prothero as she beat the gong. "Oh, they won't be there," said Mr. Prothero. "It's Christmas." Well, there was no fire to be seen, only clouds of smoke, then Mr. Prothero standing in the middle of them, waving his slipper as though he were conducting. "Do something," he said. And we threw our snowballs into the smoke. I think we missed Mr. Prothero, and ran out of the house to the telephone box. "Well, let's call the police as well," Jim said, "and the ambulance, and Ernie Jenkins. He likes fires." But we only called the fire brigade, and soon the fire engine came, and 3 tall men in helmets brought a hose to the house, and Mr. Prothero got on just in time before they turned it on. Oh, nobody could have had a noisier Christmas Eve. And when the firemen turned off the hose and were standing in the wet, smoky room, Jim's aunt, Miss Prothero, came downstairs and peered in at them. Jim and I waited very quietly to hear what she would say to them, because she said the right thing, always. She looked at the 3 tall firemen in their shining helmets, standing among the smoke and cinders and the dissolving snowballs, and she said, "Well, would you like anything to read?" Oh, years and years and years ago, when I was a boy, it snowed and snowed. But here, a small boy says, "Oh, it snowed last year too. I made a snowman, and my brother knocked it down, and I knocked my brother down, and then we had tea." That was not the same snow, I say. Our snow was not only shaken from whitewash buckets down the sky, it came shawling out of the ground and swam and drifted out of the arms and hands and bodies of the trees. And snow grew overnight on the roofs of the houses like a pure and grandfather moss, minutely white-ivied the walls, and settled on the postman opening the gate like a dumb, numb thunderstorm of white-torn Christmas cards. "Oh, were there postmen then, too?" the boy asked. "With sprinkling eyes and wind-cherry noses on spread frozen feet, they crunched up to the doors and mittened on them manfully, but all the children could hear was a singing of bells." "You mean that the postman went rat-a-tat-tat and the doors rang?" "I mean that the bells that the children could hear were inside them." I only hear thunder sometimes, never bells." "Well, there were church bells, too. Inside them?" No. In the bat-black, snow-white belfries, tugged by bishops and storks, and they rang their tidings over the bandaged town, over the frozen foam of the powder and ice cream hills, over the crackling seas. "Oh, won't you get back to the presents?" Well, they were just ordinary postmen and presents, fond of walking, and postmen, dogs, and Christmas and the snow. They knocked on the doors with bare knuckles. Well, ours has a black knocker. And then the presents. Well, they were the useful presents, yes. engulfing mufflers of the old coach days and mittens made for giant sloths, zebra scarfs of a substance like silky gum that could be tug-o-war down to the galoshes, blinding tam-o'-shanters like patchwork tea cozies, and bunny-suited busbies and balaclavas for victims of head-shrinking types, from ants who always wore wool next to their skin. There were mustached and rasping vests that made you wonder why the ants had any skin left at all. And once I had a little crocheted nose bag from an ant, now, alas, no longer whinnying with us. And pictureless books in which small boys, though warned with quotations not to, would skate on Farmer Giles's pond and did, and drowned, and books that told me everything about the wasp, except why. Well, get on to the useless presents. Bags of moist and many-colored jelly babies and a folded flag and a false nose and a tram conductor's cap and a machine that punched tickets and rang a bell. Never a slingshot. Once by mistake that no one could explain. A little hatchet. And a celluloid duck that made, when you pressed it, a most unduck-like sound, a mewing moo that an ambitious cat might make who wished to be a cow, and a painting book in which I could make the grass, the trees, the sea, and the animals any color I pleased. Hard-boiled toffee, fudge, and all sorts, crunches, cracknels, humbugs, glaciers, marzipan, and butter Welsh for the Welsh, and troops of bright tin soldiers, when, if they could not fight, could always run, and snakes and families and happy ladders and easy hobby games for little engineers, complete with instructions. Oh, easy for Leonardo. And a whistle to make the dogs bark, to wake up the old man next door, to make him beat on the wall with his stick, to shake our picture off the wall. And a packet of candy cigarettes. You put one in your mouth, and you stood at the corner of the street, and you waited for hours, in vain, for an old lady to scold you for smoking a cigarette, and then, with a smirk, you ate it. Well, and then it was breakfast under the balloons. Were the uncles like in our house? Oh, there are always uncles at Christmas, the same uncles. And on Christmas morning, with dog-disturbing whistle and sugar fags, I would scour the swatch town for the news of the little world and find always a dead bird by the white post office or by the deserted swings. Perhaps a robin, all but one of his fires out. Some few large men sat in the front parlors without their collars, uncles, almost certainly, trying their new cigars, holding them out judiciously at arm's length, returning them to their mouths, then holding them out again, as though waiting for an explosion. And some few small ants, not wanted in the kitchen, nor anywhere else for that matter, sat on the very edges of their chairs, poised and brittle, afraid to break like faded cups and saucers. Then there would be the gravy smell of the dinners of others, the bird smell, the brandy, the pudding, the mince, coiling up to my nostrils, when out of a snow-clogged side lane would come a boy, the spit of myself, with a pink-tipped cigarette and a violet past of a black eye, cocky as a bullfinch, leering all to himself. And I hated him on sight and sound, and would be about to put my dog whistle to my lips and blow him off the face of Christmas, when suddenly he, with a violet wink, put his whistle to his lips and blew so stridently, so high, so exquisitely loud, that gobbling faces, their cheeks bulged with goose, would press against their tinseled windows the whole length of the white echoing street. For dinner we had turkey and blazing pudding, and after dinner the uncle sat in front of the fire, loosened all buttons, put their large moist hands over their watch chains, groaned a little, and slept. Mothers, aunts, and sisters scuttled to and fro, bearing tureens. Auntie Bessie, who had already been frightened twice by a clockwork mouse, whimpered to the sideboard and had some elderberry wine. The dog was sick. Auntie Dozy had to have 3 aspirins, but Auntie Hannah, who liked her port, stood in the middle of the snow-bound backyard singing like a big bosom thrush. Well, I would blow up balloons to see how big they would blow up to. And when they burst, which they all did, the uncles jumbled and rumbled. Or I would go out, my bright new boots squeaking, into the white world, onto the seaward hill, to call on Jim and Dan and Jack, and to pad through the still streets, leaving huge, deep footprints in the hidden pavements. You know, I bet people will think there's been hippos. Well, what would you do if you saw a hippo coming down our street? I'd go like this, bang! I'd throw him over the railings and roll him down the hill, and then I'd tickle him under the ear, and he'd wag his tail. Well, what would you do if you saw 2 hippos? Iron-flanked and bellowing, he-hippos clanked and battered through the scudding snow toward us, and we passed Mr. Daniel's house. Well, let's post Mr. Daniel a snowball through his letterbox. Oh, let's write things in the snow. Let's write, Mr. Daniel looks like a spaniel all over his lawn. Or we walked on the white shore. Can the fish see it snowing? Then we returned home. At tea, the recovered uncles would be jolly. The ice cake loomed in the center of the table like a marble grave. Auntie Hannah laced her tea with rum because, after all, it was only once a year. We'll bring out the tall tales now that we told by the fire, as the gaslight bubbled like a deep-sea diver. Ghosts hooed like owls in the long nights when I dared not look over my shoulder. Animals lurked in the cubbyhole under the snares where the gas meter ticked. And I remember that we went singing carols once when there wasn't the shaving of a moon to light the flying streets. At the end of a long road was a drive that led to a large house, and we stumbled up the darkness of the drive that night, each of us afraid, each one holding a stone in his hand in case, and all of us too brave to say a word. The wind through the trees made noises as of old and unpleasant, and maybe web-footed men wheezing in caves. We reached the black bulk of the house. What shall we give them? Hark the herald? No, Jack said. Good King Wenceslas. I'll count 3. 1, 2, 3. And we began to sing, our voices high and seemingly distant in the snow-felted darkness round the house that was occupied by nobody we knew. We stood close together near the dark door. Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen. And then a small, dry voice, like the voice of someone who has not spoken for a long time, joined our singing. A small, dry, eggshell voice from the other side of the door, a small, dry voice through the keyhole. And when we stopped running, we were outside our house. The front room was lovely. Balloons floated under the hot water bottle gulping gas. Everything was good again and shone over the town. Perhaps it was a ghost, Jim said. Perhaps it was trolls, Dan said. he was always reading. "Let's go in and see if there's any jelly left," Jack said, and we did that. Always on Christmas night there was music. An uncle played the fiddle, a cousin sang Cherry Ripe, and another uncle sang Drake's Drum. It was very warm in the little house. Auntie Hannah, who by now had got on to the parsnip wine, sang a song about bleeding hearts and death, and in another in which she said her heart was like a bird's nest. And then everybody laughed again, and then I went to bed. Looking through my bedroom window out into the moonlight and the unending smoke-colored snow, I could see the lights in the windows and all the other houses on our hill, and hear the music rising from them up the long, steadily falling night. I turned the gas down. I got into bed. I said some words to the close and holy darkness, and then I slept. Well, thank you for indulging me in that. That's my favorite Christmas piece, Child's Christmas in Wales by Dylan Thomas, and you can buy a very nice, if you want to get a nice Christmas card for somebody, you can buy a very nice small edition of that poem with some illustrations in it for not very much money. And I think Bernie and Jane have those downtown. I'll give a plug to them on that. Take a quick sip of coffee. Well, you like the last recipe, I take it, and you sobered up from it. I'll give you one more recipe. I think you need a couple of them. This one was by a Professor Bosch and Edward Lear, actually, and it's how to make Goosey patties. Goosey patties. Again, if you want to take it down, I'll give you time. First of all, you need to sniff out a pig, 3 or 4 years of age, and tie him by the off hind leg to a post. Place 5 pounds of currants, 5 of sugar, 2 pecks of peas, 18 roast chestnuts, a candle, and 6 bushels of turnips within that pig's reach. If he eats these, constantly provide him with more. Then procure some cream, some slices of Cheshire cheese, 4 quires of foolscap paper, and a packet of black pins. Work the whole into a paste and spread it out to dry on a sheet of clean, brown, waterproof linen. Now, when that paste is perfectly dry, but not before, proceed to beat that pig violently with the handle of a large broom. If he squeals, beat him again. Visit the paste and beat the pig alternately for some days, and ascertain if at the end of that period the whole is about to turn into Goosey patties. If it does not then, it never will. And in that case, that pig may be let loose, and the whole process may be considered as finished. Well, that's a ridiculous recipe, but not much ridiculous in some I've read in cookbooks, at least to me. This is by Charles Dickens. It's not A Christmas Carol, so it's not that long. But it's a nice short piece that he wrote called A Christmas Garland. It has a wonderful message in it, I think. Christmas time, that person must be a misanthrope indeed, in whose breasts something like a jovial feeling is not roused, in whose mind some pleasant associations are not awakened by the recurrence of Christmas. There are people who will tell you that Christmas is not to them what it used to be, that each succeeding Christmas has found some cherished hope or happy prospect of the year before dimmed or passed away, that the present only serves to remind them of reduced circumstances and straitened incomes. Certainly that's true this year. Of the feasts they once bestowed on hollow friends, and of the cold looks that meet them now in adversity and misfortune. Never heed such dismal reminiscences. There are few who have lived long enough in the world who cannot call up such thoughts any day in the year. Then do not select the merriest of the 365 for your doleful recollections, but draw your chair nearer the burning fire, fill the glass, and send round the song. And if your room be smaller than it was a dozen years ago, or if your glasses be filled with reeking punch instead of sparkling wine, put a good face on the matter and empty it offhand and fill another and troll off the old ditty you used to sing, and thank God it's no worse. Look on the merry faces of your children, if you have any, as they sit round the fire. One little seat may be empty. One slight form that gladdened the father's heart or roused the mother's pride to look upon may not be there. Bah. Dwell not upon the sadness of the past. Reflect upon your present blessings, of which you have many, not on your past misfortunes, of which you have some. Then fill your glass again with a merry face and contented heart, our life on it, but your Christmas shall be merry and your new year a happy one. For who can be insensible to the outpourings of good feeling, the honest exchange of affectionate attachment which abound at this season of the year? A Christmas family party. Oh, we know of nothing in nature more delightful. There seems a magic in the very name of Christmas. Petty jealousies and discords are forgotten. Social feelings are awakened in bosoms to which they have long been strangers. Father and son, or brother and sister, who have met and passed with averted gaze or a look of cold recognition for months before, offer and return a cordial embrace and bury their past animosities in their present kindness. Kindly hearts that have yearned towards each other but have been withheld by false notions of pride and self-dignity are again reunited, and all is kindness and benevolence. Oh, would that Christmas lasted the whole year through, as it ought, and that the prejudices and passions which deform our better nature were never called into action among those to whom they should never be strangers. Good advice. I'll close with a very famous Scottish poem by a very famous Scottish poet. And I'm going to read it in a kind of halting Lowlands dialect, a Scottish dialect. A Scotsman might laugh at me for doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And there are a few words that perhaps don't seem to be English words, in a sense they're not. They're Gaelic words, but they're in this. So I'll read this, and you'll recognize it, but you may recognize it more by an anglicized version of it. It's called Auld Lang Syne. It's a New Year's poem, but it's a holiday. Should old acquaintance be forgot, and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot, and days of Auld Lang Syne? Ah, for Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll tak a cup of kindness yet, for Auld Lang Syne. We twa hae roon about the braes, and pulled the gowans fine, but we've wandered mony a weary foot sin Auld Lang Syne. We twa hae paddled in the burn frae morning sun till dine, but seas between us braid hae roared sin Auld Lang Syne. And here's a hand, my trusty fiere, and gie's a hand of thine, and we'll tak a right good willie wat for Auld Lang Syne. And surely you'll be your pint stopped and surely I'll be mine, and we'll tak a cup o' kindness yet for Auld Lang Syne. For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll tak a cup o' kindness yet for Auld Lang Syne. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Thank you.